Darius Johnson had always dreamed of playing in the big leagues, and now, at 26, he was finally here. Atlanta was buzzing with excitement. The Atlanta Spartans were in trouble, deep in a losing streak, and everyone was looking at Darius as their last hope. After dominating the college football scene, Darius had been hailed as a game-changer, the player who could turn the season around. But as he stepped into the team's locker room for the first time, the atmosphere wasn't as welcoming as he'd imagined. "Yo, that's the guy," one of the players muttered, nudging his teammate. The eyes of the entire team fell on Darius as he entered. Some looked curious, others indifferent, and a few seemed skeptical. Darius could feel the weight of expectation on his shoulders already. In the middle of the locker room stood Jack Thompson, the Spartans' head coach. A man in his late 40s, Jack was a veteran in the game, but his cold stare and crossed arms gave Darius an uneasy feeling. "Darius Johnson," Jack said, not bothering to smile. "Welcome to the Spartans." "Thanks, Coach," Darius replied, extending his hand. Jack hesitated for a brief moment before shaking it. The handshake was firm, but brief, almost like a test. The rest of the players quietly observed. Darius could feel the tension. Jack's tone wasn't exactly warm, but he wasn't here to make friends. He was here to win games. As the media gathered outside for Darius' first press conference, Jack addressed the team in the locker room. "Listen up, everyone. We've been in a slump, and I know some of you are hoping this guy will fix all of our problems." Jack motioned to Darius without even looking at him. "But let me make one thing clear, we don't need any saviors here. We need a team." Darius kept his expression neutral, but the coach's words stung. He had been through this before, people doubting him because of where he came from or what he looked like. But he had always proven them wrong. Later, at the press conference, Darius stood tall in front of the cameras. The media asked the usual questions, about his plans for the season, how he was adjusting to the team, and whether he could handle the pressure. "I've been preparing for this my whole life," Darius answered confidently. "I know what's expected of me, and I'm ready to give it my all for the Spartans." "Do you think you can turn things around for the team?" one reporter asked. "It's not just about me," Darius said, choosing his words carefully. "Football's a team sport. I'm here to play my part and help in any way I can. We'll turn things around together." In the back of the room, Jack stood with his arms crossed, listening but not saying a word. He didn't seem convinced. The tension between the new star player and the head coach was already evident, though no one dared to speak of it yet. As the press conference ended, Darius walked back to the locker room, where a few teammates introduced themselves. Marcus "Big Man" Jones, one of the team's veterans, walked up to him. "Good to have you, man. Been hearing a lot about you," Marcus said, offering a fist bump. "Thanks, Marcus. Hope I can live up to the hype," Darius replied, bumping fists. "You will. Just don't let Coach get in your head," Marcus said, lowering his voice. "He's tough to please." Darius nodded, understanding that he was walking into something more complicated than just football. This wasn't just about the game, it was about proving himself all over again. But Darius had never backed down from a challenge. He wasn't about to start now. Darius arrived at the practice facility early the next morning, ready to prove himself. He had heard the whispers about how Coach Thompson was tough, rigid, and stuck in his ways, but Darius had dealt with difficult coaches before. He was confident that, if he worked hard and showed what he could do, things would fall into place. But from the moment practice began, something felt off. "All right, let's go through the playbook." Jack's voice echoed across the field. His tone was sharp, commanding. He was the kind of coach who believed in tough love, or so it seemed. "Stick to the basics today. Darius, you'll be running some decoy routes." "Decoy routes?" Darius thought, keeping his face neutral. He'd expected to be more involved, maybe even show off some of the skills that had gotten him here. But instead, Jack was pushing him into a minor role on the field. Still, he complied. As the practice progressed, Darius noticed a pattern. Jack barely acknowledged him, focusing his attention on other players, even ones who clearly weren't performing as well. He found himself running routes that had little impact on the play, his potential going unnoticed. "Coach," Darius called out after a few drills. "Any chance I could get a few reps at wide out? I feel like I could make an impact." Jack didn't even look at him. "Stick to the plan, Johnson," he said dismissively, moving on to instruct another player. Darius clenched his jaw. He was here to contribute, not just follow orders that kept him on the sidelines. But he didn't push back. He knew better than to make waves too early. Later, in the locker room, the tension was palpable. Marcus, big man, Jones sat down next to Darius, sensing his frustration. "Rough first practice, huh?" Marcus asked, his voice low. "Yeah, something like that," Darius muttered, stripping off his cleats. "Feels like coach doesn't want me out there." Marcus glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. That's how Jack is. He's old school, stuck in his ways. He doesn't like change, and, well, sometimes it feels like he's got a problem with certain guys, if you know what I mean. Darius nodded, understanding what Marcus was implying. He had dealt with this kind of subtle prejudice before, people who didn't say anything outright but found ways to limit his potential because of their biases. "I'm just here to play, man," Darius said, exhaling slowly. "But it's hard to play when they won't even let you on the field." "Give it time," Marcus said. "You're too good to keep off the field forever. The guys know it. The fans know it. Coach will have no choice but to see it eventually." Darius appreciated Marcus' support, but deep down, he wasn't so sure. He had seen coaches like Jack before, men who were so set in their ways that they'd rather lose than admit they were wrong. And if Jack Thompson didn't change his tune soon, Darius wasn't sure how he'd prove himself. As the team headed back out for more drills, Darius tried to focus. He pushed himself hard, hoping that Jack would notice. But every time he made a sharp cut, caught a ball, or executed a clean route, Jack's eyes were elsewhere. The other coaches noticed, though. Darius could feel their eyes on him, whispering among themselves. Maybe, just maybe, they'd say something to Jack. When practice ended, Jack pulled the team together. "Good work today, everyone. Some of you need to pick it up." He shot a quick glance at Darius, "but overall, we're making progress. We've got a big game coming up, so stay focused." "That's all for now." Darius clenched his fists, holding back his frustration. It was clear that Jack was intentionally sidelining him, and it wasn't just about football. There was something deeper here, something that went beyond the field. As the players dispersed, Marcus gave Darius a reassuring pat on the back. "Hang in there, bro, don't let him get to you." Darius nodded, though the fire inside him was already starting to burn. He wasn't the type to sit back and let someone else control his destiny. One way or another, he was going to make sure Jack Thompson saw what he was capable of. The days turned into weeks, and Darius found himself stuck in the same frustrating routine. Every practice, he gave everything he had, running drills with precision, pushing his body harder than anyone else on the field. But no matter how well he performed, Jack Thompson seemed determined to keep him in the shadows. One Friday afternoon, the Spartans were gearing up for their first home game. The energy at practice was intense, with everyone wanting to prove themselves. For Darius, this was his moment. He had been patient, waiting for the chance to show what he could do on game day. As the team huddled around Jack for the game plan, Darius listened carefully. He had memorized every play in the playbook and was ready to execute. But when Jack began assigning positions, Darius' name was missing, again. "Coach," Darius said, stepping forward. I'm ready. I can handle the deep routes. Let me show you what I've got. Jack glanced at him, then looked away, almost dismissively. We're going with the starters for this one, Johnson. You'll stay in as backup, run decoys if we need them. Backup. Decoys. Darius couldn't believe it. This was supposed to be his breakout moment, but Jack was keeping him on the sidelines again. With all due respect, Coach, Darius pushed, I've been working hard. I know I can contribute more than that. Jack narrowed his eyes. You'll play the role I give you, Johnson. Don't question my decisions. The air between them felt thick with tension. Darius knew that pressing the issue further wouldn't help, but he was reaching his breaking point. He had worked too hard for this opportunity to be held back by a coach who wouldn't even give him a chance. After practice, Darius sat in the locker room, his frustration boiling over. Marcus, noticing the look on his face, walked over. Man, that was rough, Marcus said, sitting down next to him. I don't get it. You've been killing it out there. Exactly, Darius replied, shaking his head. I've done everything right. What more do I have to do? Marcus sighed. Coach is set in his ways. He's not gonna make it easy for you. But don't let that get in your head. You're too good to sit out for long. Darius knew Marcus was trying to be supportive, but it wasn't enough to ease the frustration building inside him. He had been through this before, fighting for a spot, proving himself over and over. But this time felt different. This time, it wasn't just about skill. It was about something deeper, something Jack wouldn't admit but was obvious to everyone else. Later that evening, Darius sat in his apartment, staring at the game film on his laptop. He had spent hours studying the Spartans' plays, figuring out how he could fit into the offense, imagining himself making game-winning catches. But all that preparation felt pointless if Jack wasn't even going to let him play. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his older brother, Terrell. Terrell, how's practice? You ready for the big game? Darius stared at the message for a moment, unsure how to respond. He wanted to say he was ready, that everything was going great, but he couldn't lie to his brother. Darius, coach still won't give me any reps, not looking good. A minute later, Terrell's name popped up on the screen as an incoming call. Hey, Darius answered. What's going on, man? They brought you in to be the star. What's this about sitting out? Terrell's voice was filled with concern. Darius sighed. I don't know, man. I've been doing everything right, but it's like coach doesn't even see me. I feel like he's holding me back on purpose. Sounds like some bullshit to me, Terrell said bluntly. Look, don't let this guy mess with your head. You've been through worse and come out on top. You've got this. I know, but it's different now. This is supposed to be my shot, and I feel like I'm losing it because of something I can't control. Then make them see you, Terrell said, his tone firm. You've always been good at making people see what they don't want to. Don't let some stubborn coach keep you down. Darius appreciated his brother's words, but the reality was sinking in. He couldn't force Jack to see his value, no matter how hard he worked. He just had to keep pushing and hope that eventually, he'd break through. Yeah, Darius said quietly. I hear you. As the call ended, Darius leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Terrell was right, he'd faced obstacles before and come out stronger. But this time, the stakes were higher, and the path ahead seemed even steeper. The day of the first game had finally arrived. The stands at Spartan Field were packed, fans donning the team's black and gold colors, buzzing with excitement. This was the moment Darius had been waiting for since he joined the Washington Spartans. But as he stood on the sidelines, suited up in his number 87 jersey, there was a sinking feeling in his chest. Darius had hoped that, by now, Coach Jack Thompson would have seen his potential, maybe even given him a starting spot. But just as in practice, Jack had relegated him to the bench. As the team ran their warm-ups, Darius couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. He knew he should be out there contributing, making plays that would change the course of the game. Instead, he was watching from the sidelines. Marcus jogged up to him, slightly out of breath. "You good, D?" Darius forced a smile. "Yeah, man. Just itching to get out there." Marcus nodded, understanding. "You'll get your shot, bro. You're too good to keep off the field forever." Darius appreciated the words, but deep down, he wasn't so sure. The way Jack had treated him in practice, the way he'd been pushed aside, there was more at play here than just football. The game kicked off, and it didn't take long for things to start going wrong. The Spartans' offense struggled from the start, with their starting wide receivers unable to create separation or make key catches. Every missed opportunity felt like a punch to the gut for Darius. He knew he could help, but Jack wasn't looking his way. By halftime, the Spartans were down by 10 points. The locker room was tense, players frustrated as Jack gave a heated speech. "We're better than this," Jack shouted, pacing in front of the team. "We're making stupid mistakes out there. You need to execute." Darius sat silently, listening to the same speech he had heard 100 times before from coaches like Jack. There was no acknowledgement of the fact that the team's current approach wasn't working. No room for adaptation. Just more of the same rigid strategy. As the team filed back out onto the field for the second half, Darius felt the frustration bubbling up inside him. He was tired of being ignored, tired of sitting on the bench while the team struggled. He was ready to prove himself. The second half played out much like the first. Missed opportunities, dropped passes, and frustration mounting on the field. With just minutes left in the fourth quarter, the Spartans were down by a touchdown, and the clock was ticking. Darius stood at the edge of the sideline, eyes locked on the field. This was the moment. They needed a playmaker. They needed someone to step up. "Coach!" Darius called out, his voice cutting through the noise of the stadium. "Let me in. I can make a difference." Jack didn't even turn to look at him. "Stay on the bench, Johnson," he snapped. "We're going with the starters." Darius clenched his fists, his frustration boiling over. This wasn't just about the game anymore. It was personal. Jack was refusing to let him play not because of his performance, but because of something deeper. Marcus jogged over, catching the tail end of the conversation. "Man, that's messed up," he said quietly. "He knows you could help. He's just not giving you the chance." "I'm done waiting," Darius muttered under his breath, watching as the Spartans' final drive stalled on a fourth down. The clock ran out, and the game ended in a disappointing loss for the Spartans. As the team trudged back to the locker room, heads hung low, Darius' frustration finally reached its peak. He had been patient, done everything by the book, but nothing had changed. Jack Thompson was holding him back, and Darius was no longer willing to sit silently and accept it. In the locker room, the tension was thick. Players stripped off their gear in silence, the sting of the loss hanging heavy in the air. Jack stormed in, his face red with frustration. "That's on all of you," he barked, his voice echoing in the locker room. "We lost because you couldn't execute." Darius, sitting on the bench, couldn't hold back any longer. He stood up, his voice steady but firm. "We lost because you didn't use the right players, coach." The room fell silent. Every head turned to Darius, shocked by the boldness of his statement. Jack's face turned from red to a dangerous shade of purple. "What did you just say?" Jack growled, stepping toward Darius. "You heard me," Darius said, his voice unwavering. "You had someone ready to make plays, and you kept me on the bench." Jack's eyes narrowed. "You think you know better than me, Johnson? You think you're a star? You haven't proven anything." Darius met Jack's glare, his chest rising and falling with controlled anger. I haven't had the chance to prove anything because you won't let me. For a moment, it seemed like Jack might explode. But instead, he just turned and walked away, leaving the locker room in tense silence. As the door slammed behind him, the weight of what had just happened settled over the room. Marcus, standing nearby, gave Darius a slow nod of respect. Took guts to say that, man. Darius exhaled, his heart still racing. Had to be said. The atmosphere in the Washington Spartans locker room was still thick with tension the next day. After Darius' bold confrontation with coach Jack Thompson, word had spread quickly among the team and even the local sports media. Everyone knew that something had to give, but no one was sure what would happen next. Darius walked into the facility that morning, his head held high but his mind racing. He had no regrets about what he'd said, but he also knew that standing up to Jack might cost him his spot on the team. The air was heavy with uncertainty, and every glance from his teammates carried a mix of admiration and concern. As he approached his locker, Marcus greeted him with a nod. "You all right, man?" Darius shrugged, setting his bag down. "I guess we'll find out soon enough." Before they could say anything else, the locker room door swung open, and in walked Jack Thompson. His face was set in a hard expression, eyes cold and unforgiving. The room fell silent. "Johnson," Jack called out, his voice commanding attention. "My office. Now." Darius exchanged a quick glance with Marcus before heading toward the coach's office. As he stepped inside, the tension between him and Jack was palpable. Jack motioned for him to sit down, but Darius remained standing. "I'll cut straight to the point," Jack began, folding his arms across his chest. "You embarrassed me in front of the team yesterday. You don't speak to your coach like that, and you sure as hell don't question my decisions." Darius stood tall, his voice calm but firm. "I spoke up because I believe in this team, coach. I believe I can help us win. But I've been here for weeks, and you haven't given me a chance to prove myself." Jack leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You think you've earned the right to play? You think because you're some big shot in college, you automatically deserve a starting spot?" "No," Darius said, meeting Jack's gaze without flinching. "I think I deserve the chance to show you what I can do. That's all I'm asking for." Jack was silent for a moment, his jaw clenched. It was clear that Darius' words had struck a nerve, but Jack wasn't ready to back down. "I run this team how I see fit," Jack said, his voice low and controlled. "If you want to play, you prove yourself on my terms. You do what I say, when I say it. Got it?" Darius didn't break eye contact. "I'll play by your rules, coach. But if you keep holding me back because of something that has nothing to do with football, you're doing this team a disservice." Jack's eyes flashed with anger, but he didn't respond. Instead, he pointed toward the door. "Get out. And don't speak to me like that again." As Darius left the office, his heart was racing, but his mind was clear. He knew he had made his point, even if Jack wasn't ready to admit it. The conversation had left a mark, and now it was only a matter of time before something shifted. Later that day, practice resumed as usual. But there was an undeniable tension in the air. The other players had heard about Darius' confrontation with Jack, and many of them quietly respected his courage. During drills, Marcus jogged over to Darius. "So, how did it go in there?" Darius smirked, catching a pass and tossing it back. "Not great. But I think I made him think, at least." Marcus shook his head. "Man, you've got guts. Most of us wouldn't dare say half of what you said." "I'm not trying to start something," Darius replied, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "I just want a fair shot." "You deserve it," Marcus said. "And we all know it." As practice went on, Darius pushed himself harder than ever, determined to show everyone what he was capable of. He caught every pass, ran every route with precision, and didn't let a single opportunity slip by. But even as he proved his skills on the field, he could feel Jack's eyes on him, watching, waiting. Darius knew that this battle wasn't over. Jack was still in control, and if Darius wanted to change things, he'd have to keep fighting for his place. That evening, as the team filed out of the locker room, Darius sat down on a bench, exhausted but resolute. Marcus joined him, sitting down with a sigh. "Think things will change?" Marcus asked. Darius looked up at the darkening sky. "I don't know. But I'm not giving up." Marcus clapped him on the back. "Good. Because this team needs you." The pressure was mounting. The Washington Spartans were set to face their toughest rival, the New York Renegades, in a critical game that would determine their place in the playoffs. As the days leading up to the game ticked away, tensions in the locker room grew more intense. The team was losing faith in coach Jack Thompson's leadership, and Darius Johnson was still being sidelined, despite his undeniable talent. Darius walked into the locker room the day before the game, his heart heavy with frustration. He had been giving everything in practice, yet Jack hadn't given him more than a few minutes of play during the last couple of games. The rest of the team was starting to notice too. Marcus caught up to him in the hallway. "Man, I don't get it. You're out there killing it, but Jack keeps you benched. What's his deal?" Darius shook his head, the frustration evident in his voice. "It's not about the game, Marcus. It never has been. I think he just doesn't want to see me succeed." Marcus frowned, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "You think it's because?" Darius looked at his friend, his expression hardening. "Yeah, I do. It's not just me. You've seen how he treats anyone who doesn't fit his idea of what a player should be. I'm not gonna let it break me, though." Before Marcus could respond, the door to the locker room slammed open, and Coach Jack strode in, his face set in a scowl. "Team meeting, now," he barked. The players quickly gathered around, and the tension in the room was thick. Jack stood in front of them, arms crossed, his gaze sweeping across the group. "Tomorrow's game is make or break. We're up against the Renegades, and I'm not about to let this season go down the drain." He paused, looking directly at Darius for a moment before continuing. "We need discipline. We need focus. And we need players who can handle the pressure." His voice was sharp, and it was clear who his words were directed toward. Darius clenched his fists but said nothing. He wasn't going to let Jack bait him into an argument, not in front of the whole team. Jack continued, "If any of you think you deserve to be out there, you'd better prove it tomorrow. I don't care who you are, where you've played before, or what you think you're owed. If you can't handle the heat, you're out." The room was silent as Jack finished speaking. He turned and walked out without waiting for a response, leaving the players to absorb his words. Marcus leaned over to Darius. "He's talking about you, man. He's trying to push you." Darius exhaled, his voice low. "I know. But he's not going to break me." The next day, the stadium buzzed with anticipation as the Spartans prepared to face the Renegades. The atmosphere was electric, with fans filling the stands, and the players warming up on the field. But beneath the excitement, a storm was brewing within the Spartans. Darius stood on the sideline, fully geared up, but unsure if he would even see the field. As the game began, Jack's decision became clear. Darius was once again benched, despite the importance of the game and the team's need for a spark. By halftime, the Spartans were down by 2 touchdowns. The offense was struggling, and frustration was boiling over. Players were muttering among themselves, casting uneasy glances at the coaching staff. As they filed into the locker room for the halftime break, Marcus pulled Darius aside. "This is ridiculous. You should be out there, man. Everyone knows it." Before Darius could respond, Jack stormed into the locker room, his face flushed with anger. He slammed his clipboard down on a bench, causing everyone to go silent. "What the hell is wrong with you guys out there?" he yelled, pacing in front of the team. "You're playing like you've already given up." Darius watched from the back of the room, feeling the weight of Jack's frustration. The coach's eyes darted around, looking for someone to blame. Finally, they landed on Darius. "And you?" Jack pointed at him, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think you're too good to be on this team? You think you can just coast through and not prove anything?" Darius stepped forward, his heart pounding. "I've been trying to prove myself since the day I got here, coach. But you've never given me the chance." Jack sneered. "Maybe because you haven't earned it." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as the other players exchanged uneasy looks. Darius took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He wasn't going to let Jack get away with this. "I've been busting my ass in practice," Darius said, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "I've done everything you've asked. If you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who's not fit to lead this team." The players around him shifted, clearly unsettled by the tension. Marcus gave Darius a subtle nod of support. Jack's face flushed red with fury. "You don't get to talk to me like that," he spat. "You want a chance? Fine. You'll start the second half. But if you screw this up, you're done. Got it?" Darius nodded, his jaw set. "I won't screw it up." The second half of the game was about to begin, and Darius stood on the sideline, staring at the field. The crowd's roar echoed in his ears, but all he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. This was his moment. After months of fighting for recognition, he was finally getting his chance to prove himself on the field. But it was more than just about playing football, it was about showing everyone, especially Coach Jack, what he was truly capable of. Marcus approached him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "You ready, man? This is your time." Darius nodded, his voice steady but full of resolve. "I've been ready, Marcus. Let's do this." The whistle blew, signaling the start of the second half. As Darius jogged onto the field, the energy in the stadium shifted. The Spartans fans, desperate for a comeback, cheered loudly, but there was an undercurrent of doubt. They had been watching their team struggle all season, and many weren't sure if Darius could turn things around. The first snap came quickly. Darius positioned himself in the backfield, his muscles coiled with anticipation. The quarterback, Jason, called the play, his voice echoing through the helmet's earpiece. "Let's go, D. I'm counting on you," Jason said, his tone serious yet hopeful. Darius nodded, locking eyes with Jason for a split second before the ball was snapped. As soon as the play began, Darius exploded off the line. He weaved through defenders with a speed and precision that left them scrambling to keep up. He spotted a gap in the Renegades' defense and sprinted toward it, his feet barely touching the ground. "Go, Darius! Go!" Marcus shouted from the sideline, his voice blending with the cheers of the crowd. Within seconds, Darius was 20 yards down the field, the defense closing in. He juked left, then right, leaving one of the Renegades' best defenders stumbling behind him. With nothing but open field ahead, Darius sprinted toward the end zone, his heart racing with every step. The crowd erupted as he crossed the goal line, the first touchdown of the half. Jason ran over to him, a wide grin on his face. "Hell of a run, man. We needed that." Darius caught his breath, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. This is just the beginning. Coach Jack stood on the sideline, arms crossed, his expression unreadable as he watched Darius make the play of the game. The rest of the coaching staff murmured in disbelief. "Did you see that?" one of the assistant coaches whispered. "He's got talent, Jack. Real talent." Jack didn't respond, his jaw clenched tightly. He knew Darius was proving him wrong, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. The game continued, and Darius didn't slow down. Play after play, he was relentless. Whether it was running the ball, catching passes, or blocking for his teammates, Darius was a force on the field. The Spartans, fueled by his energy, started clawing their way back into the game. The Renegades' defense, once confident, was now struggling to contain him. As the clock ticked down, the Spartans were within striking distance of tying the game. It was 4th down, and they needed a miracle. The entire stadium was on its feet, the tension palpable. Jason huddled with the team, his voice low but urgent. "We're going for it. Darius, this is on you. Get open, and I'll get you the ball." Darius nodded, his focus razor-sharp. He had waited his whole career for a moment like this, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. The ball was snapped, and everything seemed to slow down. Darius darted down the field, his eyes scanning for a break in the defense. He spotted a small opening and cut hard to the left, raising his hand to signal Jason. The ball sailed through the air, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Darius leaped, his arms outstretched. His fingers grazed the ball, and he pulled it in, tucking it tightly against his chest as he hit the ground. The crowd roared, the noise deafening. He had made the catch. The Spartans had tied the game. The sideline exploded in cheers, players jumping up and down, hugging each other in celebration. Marcus ran over to Darius, nearly tackling him in excitement. You did it, man. That was all you." Darius smiled, his chest heaving with exhaustion and exhilaration. "It's not over yet." As the game went into overtime, Darius knew this was his moment to cement his place on the team, not just as a player but as a leader. The Spartans' defense held strong, forcing the Renegades to punt. Now, it was up to the offense to finish what they had started. Coach Jack paced nervously on the sideline, his eyes darting between the field and the scoreboard. For the first time, he wasn't sure what to say. Darius had outplayed every expectation, and now the fate of the game rested on his shoulders. Jason gathered the team for one final huddle. "We've got this, guys. Darius, I'm coming to you again. You've been unstoppable." Darius nodded, his mind clear. This was it, the moment that could define his career. He glanced at Coach Jack, standing stiffly on the sideline. For the first time, Darius felt no resentment, only determination. The ball was snapped, and Darius took off, cutting through the defense with ease. Jason saw him open and fired the ball his way. Darius caught it and, with a burst of speed, outran the defenders, crossing the goal line for the game-winning touchdown. The stadium erupted in chaos, fans screaming, teammates rushing the field to celebrate. Darius stood in the end zone, surrounded by his teammates, a wide smile on his face. He had done it. Back on the sideline, Coach Jack watched in silence as the team celebrated. He knew Darius had saved the game, saved the season, really. As the players began to make their way back to the locker room, Jack caught Darius's eye. For the first time, there was no anger or pride in Jack's gaze, just respect. "You played one hell of a game out there," Jack said quietly, barely audible over the cheers of the crowd. Darius simply nodded. "I've been trying to tell you that all along, Coach." The locker room was filled with excitement after the Spartans' stunning victory. Players laughed, slapped each other on the back, and exchanged words of encouragement. Darius, however, sat quietly in front of his locker, staring at the ground, processing the weight of what had just happened. His body was exhausted, but his mind was racing. Marcus walked over, a huge grin on his face. "Man, you were unstoppable out there. That touchdown, you had them all chasing you like they didn't stand a chance." Darius smiled faintly, still catching his breath. "It wasn't just me, Marcus. The whole team stepped up. We earned that win together." "Yeah, but you were the spark, D. You lit the fire." Marcus sat down next to him. You proved them wrong. Darius leaned back, exhaling deeply. It feels good, but I can't shake the feeling that Coach Jack still doesn't trust me. Even after everything. Just as Darius said that, the locker room doors swung open and Coach Jack entered. The lively chatter immediately quieted down. Jack's expression was hard to read as he scanned the room, his eyes eventually landing on Darius. Darius, a word, Jack said, his voice firm but lacking the usual edge of disdain. Darius stood up, the entire team watching the interaction with curiosity. Marcus gave him a quick nod of encouragement as Darius followed Coach Jack to the corner of the locker room, away from the others. For a moment, the two stood in silence, the noise of players in the background seeming distant. Jack looked at Darius, his face showing traces of internal conflict. You played a hell of a game today, Jack finally said, his tone serious but not hostile. Darius didn't respond immediately, unsure of where this was going. I did what I came here to do. Help the team win. Jack nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, you did more than that. I underestimated you, Darius. I won't deny it. And maybe I let other things cloud my judgment. Darius met Jack's gaze, his voice calm but filled with meaning. Other things? Like my skin color? Jack's face tightened for a moment, the weight of the accusation heavy in the air. He took a deep breath, as if he'd been waiting for this confrontation but wasn't fully prepared for it. I grew up seeing things a certain way, Jack admitted, his voice low. That doesn't excuse it, but I was wrong. Darius nodded slowly, appreciating the honesty but still feeling the sting of everything he had endured. You made it harder for me than it needed to be. I've had to prove myself every step of the way, not just as a player, but as a man. That's not the way it should be. Jack's eyes dropped to the floor for a second before he looked back up. You're right. And for what it's worth. I'm sorry. I can't change what's already happened, but I can start seeing things differently. I want you to know that. Darius studied Jack for a long moment, searching for any sign of insincerity. But all he saw was a man trying to come to terms with his own flaws. I appreciate that, Coach, Darius said, his voice measured. But respect isn't something you just give with words. You'll have to show it. Jack nodded again, understanding the challenge in Darius's words. Fair enough. And you'll get it, Darius. Starting today. With that, Jack extended his hand. For a brief moment, Darius hesitated, the weight of everything he had endured under Jack's leadership flashing through his mind. But then, slowly, he reached out and shook the coach's hand. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. As Darius returned to his locker, Marcus raised an eyebrow. What did he say? Darius sighed, sitting down heavily. He apologized. Said he was wrong about me. Marcus grinned. Well, it's about time. Yeah, Darius replied, his voice thoughtful. But we'll see if his actions match his words. The next day, at practice, Darius noticed a shift. Coach Jack called out plays that gave Darius the opportunity to shine, pushing him to use his speed and instincts. There was no hesitation in Jack's commands, no second-guessing. For the first time, Darius felt like he was truly part of the team, not just as a player but as someone the coach trusted. During a break, Marcus jogged over to Darius, water bottle in hand. Looks like Jack's finally coming around. Darius nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. Yeah. Feels different. It's like he's actually coaching me now. Better late than never, Marcus quipped. Darius chuckled, though he knew this was only the beginning of a long road ahead. Earning Jack's respect was one thing, but rebuilding the trust that had been broken would take time. As the practice came to an end, Jack approached Darius once more, clipboard in hand. You played hard today. Keep this up, and we've got a real shot at turning this season around." Darius nodded, a quiet confidence in his eyes. "That's the plan." Jack paused for a moment, then added, "You've earned your spot, Darius. From here on out, you're starting." Darius's heart skipped a beat at those words. It was the validation he had been fighting for all season. But more than that, it was a sign that change was possible, not just for him, but for the entire team. As he left the field, Darius glanced up at the empty stands, imagining the crowd that would soon fill them for the next game. He had come to the Spartans with a mission, and despite all the obstacles, he was proving that no amount of prejudice could stop him from achieving greatness. As the week progressed, the atmosphere around the Spartans shifted. Practices were more intense, and Darius felt a new energy from both his teammates and Coach Jack. The support from the team was evident. Players were starting to see Darius not just as a new recruit but as a valuable asset. It was the day before the big game against the rivals, the Thunderhawks. The tension in the locker room was palpable. Darius was lacing up his cleats when Marcus walked over, a look of determination on his face. "Tomorrow's the day, man. This is our chance to prove everyone wrong," Marcus said, his voice low but filled with excitement. Darius nodded, tightening the laces. "I know. It's more than just about winning the game. It's about showing that we belong here, and that we can overcome anything. I'm with you. Let's go out there and make a statement," Marcus replied, clapping Darius on the back. Before they could continue their conversation, Coach Jack entered the room. The team fell silent, watching as he approached Darius. "Darius, a moment?" Jack asked, his tone more relaxed than usual. Darius looked up from his gear and nodded, following Jack to the far end of the locker room. The coach's demeanor was a mix of serious and contemplative. "I wanted to talk to you about tomorrow," Jack began, his voice steady. "You've been a force on the field, and I need you to keep that up." Darius raised an eyebrow. "What's the game plan?" Jack paused, taking a deep breath. "We're going to rely on you to lead the offense. I want you to take control and make the plays we've talked about. This is your game." Darius felt a surge of confidence, but he kept his expression neutral. "Got it. I'll give it everything I've got." Jack nodded, a hint of a smile on his face. "I know you will. And I want you to know that I've been reflecting on my own actions. I'm committed to making sure that this team is one where everyone gets a fair shot. You've earned my respect, and you're a key part of our strategy now." Darius met Jack's gaze, his eyes showing a mix of relief and cautious optimism. "Thanks, Coach. That means a lot. Let's go out there tomorrow and make it count," Jack said, extending his hand. Darius shook it firmly, feeling a sense of mutual respect growing. "We will." The next day, the stadium was packed with fans eagerly awaiting the showdown between the Spartans and the Thunderhawks. The roar of the crowd was deafening as the players took the field. Darius could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he channeled that energy into his performance. As the game progressed, Darius played with a fierceness that left no doubt about his skills. He dodged tackles, made precise passes, and scored a crucial touchdown that brought the Spartans back into contention. The crowd went wild, and his teammates rallied around him, their cheers echoing through the stadium. Midway through the fourth quarter, with the game tied and the clock winding down, Darius found himself in the spotlight. The ball was snapped to him, and he saw a clear path to the end zone. He sprinted forward, breaking through the Thunderhawks' defense with a burst of speed. As he crossed the goal line, the stadium erupted in cheers. The Spartans had taken the lead, and Darius had sealed the game with a dramatic finish. He looked up at the stands, taking in the sea of cheering faces, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Back in the locker room, the team was jubilant. Players were high-fiving, and Coach Jack was beaming with pride. Darius was swarmed by his teammates, who lifted him up in celebration. Way to go, Darius. You were amazing out there. Marcus shouted, his voice filled with excitement. Darius laughed, soaking in the moment. We did it together. This win is for all of us. Coach Jack approached, clapping Darius on the shoulder. Great job today. You led us to victory. You've proven yourself, not just as a player but as a leader. Darius nodded, feeling a sense of pride and relief. Thanks, Coach. It feels good to know that we're moving forward. As the celebration continued, Darius took a moment to reflect. The journey had been challenging, and there were still hurdles to overcome. But in that moment, surrounded by teammates and a cheering crowd, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. The road ahead was still long, but he knew that with determination and support, anything was possible. The following weeks saw a significant transformation for the Spartans. Their recent victory against the Thunderhawks had rejuvenated the team's spirit and morale. Darius became an integral part of their success, proving himself as not just a great player, but also a natural leader on and off the field. One crisp autumn afternoon, the team gathered for a press conference to discuss their recent achievements and the promising future ahead. The media room buzzed with excitement as reporters and cameras focused on the Spartan star players. Darius stood beside Coach Jack and Marcus, feeling a mixture of pride and nervousness. As the press conference began, a reporter asked, Darius, how does it feel to have turned the season around for the Spartans? Darius smiled, his confidence evident. It feels amazing. I couldn't have done it without the support of my teammates and Coach Jack. We've all worked really hard to get to this point, and it's rewarding to see our efforts pay off. Coach Jack stepped in, adding, Darius has been a key player in our recent success. His dedication and skill have brought a new energy to the team. We're looking forward to the rest of the season. The questions continued, but the atmosphere was light and celebratory. After the press conference, Darius and Marcus walked outside, discussing the event. That went well, Marcus said, grinning. You handled it like a pro. Thanks, Darius replied. It's just nice to be in the spotlight for the right reasons. Marcus clapped him on the back. You've earned it. Remember when we were doubting if this team could make it? Look at us now. Darius chuckled, shaking his head. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I'm just glad we're making progress. As they talked, Coach Jack joined them, holding a folder with some new documents. Darius, Marcus, I wanted to share something with you, Jack said, his voice filled with excitement. What's up, Coach? Marcus asked. Jack handed Darius the folder. We've received offers from several sports magazines and endorsement deals. They want to feature you, Darius. It's a big opportunity. Darius opened the folder, his eyes widening at the sight of the offers. This is incredible. I didn't expect this so soon. Jack nodded. You've earned it. But remember, with these opportunities come responsibilities. Stay focused and keep leading by example. Darius looked at Marcus, who gave him a thumbs up. I will, Coach. Thanks for believing in me. As the weeks turned into months, the Spartans continued to build on their success. The team's cohesion grew stronger, and their performance on the field improved dramatically. Darius's leadership and dedication were evident in every game, and his role in the team became increasingly influential. During a particularly intense practice session, Coach Jack gathered the team for a final talk. I want to take a moment to acknowledge how far we've come. We've faced challenges, but we've overcome them together. Darius has shown what it means to lead with heart and determination. The team applauded, and Darius looked around at his teammates with a sense of fulfillment. He had come a long way from the initial skepticism and challenges, and now he was part of a team that respected and valued him. As the season progressed, the Spartans made it to the playoffs, with Darius playing a pivotal role in their success. The journey had been fraught with difficulties, but each challenge had made the team stronger and more unified. In the final game of the season, the Spartans faced their biggest rivals. The stakes were high, but the team's confidence was unwavering. As the game progressed, Darius gave it his all, leading the team with skill and determination. The game was a fierce battle, but the Spartans emerged victorious, clinching the championship. In the aftermath of the game, Darius and his teammates celebrated their hard-earned victory. Coach Jack approached Darius, his face glowing with pride. "You did it, Darius. You've proven yourself in every way." Darius smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "We did it, Coach. This is for everyone who believed in us." As the team celebrated their triumph, Darius reflected on his journey. From the initial struggles to the moment of victory, he had grown both as a player and as a person. The season had tested him in ways he never imagined, but it had also shown him the power of perseverance, teamwork, and self-belief. In the end, Darius knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was filled with new challenges and opportunities, but he was ready to face them with the same determination and spirit that had brought him this far. The future was bright, and he was excited to see where it would lead.